Today, we're diving into the life of one of the most consequential and controversial figures in modern history, Donald John Trump. He's a man who's worn many hats: real estate tycoon, reality TV star, and, of course, the 45th President of the United States. His journey is a story that has, without a doubt, fundamentally reshaped America.
Our story starts right here in Queens, New York City. Born Donald John Trump on June 14, 1946, he was the fourth of 5 kids in a very wealthy family. His father, Fred Trump, was a tough, successful real estate developer, and you could say that this world of ambition, money, and a constant drive to win, well, it shaped him from day one.
So his story really unfolds in 5 main parts. We'll kick things off with how he built his brand, then we'll look at his shocking 2016 victory, followed by his disruptive presidency. Then we'll cover the fierce pushback he faced, and finally, his historic political comeback.
All right, part 1, a brand is born. See, long before he ever thought about the White House, Trump was a master of branding. He wasn't just building skyscrapers, he was building a whole story, a mythos around himself. For decades, he was sharpening the very skills that would later rocket him to the presidency. Let's take a look at how he did it.
Trump's formal education took him from a military academy to the famous Wharton School of Finance. But you could say his real education happened in his father's real estate business. At just 25 years old, he took the reins, renamed the company the Trump Organization, and set his sights on the much flashier, high-stakes world of Manhattan.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. It's all about the narrative that he and his team carefully built. According to his official bio, his life is the American success story. This was the image he beamed out to the world for decades, the ultimate winner, the dealmaker who could do no wrong.
But, as you can imagine, the full picture is a lot more complex. His career was a real roller coaster. On one hand, you have these incredible successes, like the Grand Hyatt Hotel and the world-famous Trump Tower, which was like a symbol of 1980s excess. On the other hand, his businesses filed for corporate bankruptcy 6 different times. And that famous claim that he started with just a small loan, well, investigations later found he received what would be at least $413 million in today's money from his father's empire.
And this is a really crucial point. His business career and his media career were basically the same thing. His 1987 book, The Art of the Deal, was more than a book. It was a blueprint for his entire persona. But let's be real, it was his role as the host of The Apprentice that made him a household name. For over a decade, millions of people watched him play the ultimate CEO, delivering that signature catchphrase, "You're fired." It was, in hindsight, the perfect political audition, broadcast into living rooms across the country week after week.
Of course, his personal life was also a huge part of his public image, often playing out in the New York tabloids. He's been married 3 times, first to Ivana Zelnichkova, then to Marla Maples, and since 2005 to Melania Knauss. And from these marriages, he has 5 children: Donald Jr., Ivanka, Eric, Tiffany, and Barron, many of whom, as you know, became major players in both his business and political worlds. Okay, part 2, the outsider. So that celebrity brand he spent decades building, that became his launchpad straight into politics. In 2015, he swapped the boardroom for the campaign trail. But he didn't run like a typical politician. No, he ran as the ultimate disruptor, an outsider ready to tear down the whole establishment. And what's so fascinating is that before his 2016 run, Trump's political identity was, well, it was all over the place. He'd been a Republican, a Democrat, even part of the Reform Party. Now, for any other candidate, this would have been a huge liability. But for him, it actually became a strength. It let him claim, pretty convincingly, that he wasn't loyal to any party, only to the people.
And boy, did he rewrite the political playbook. In his very first run for office, he flattened a field of 16 experienced Republican rivals before pulling off a stunning upset against the heavily favored Hillary Clinton. I mean, think about that for a second. He was the first person to ever win the presidency with 0 prior government or military experience. It was a political earthquake.
A central tactic of his campaign, and later his presidency, was this relentless war on the press. By constantly calling major news outlets fake news and the enemy of the people, he wasn't just deflecting criticism, he was tapping into a deep-seated distrust of institutions that many of his supporters felt, positioning himself as the only one they could trust to tell them the truth.
Right. Part 3, the president. Once he got into the Oval Office, that disruption didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. His presidency was a total whirlwind of policy changes, broken traditions, and a head-on assault on the way Washington, D.C. had worked for generations.
His whole agenda was America first, pure and simple. At home, that looked like the massive Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. He also created the Space Force, the first new military branch in over 70 years. And on the world stage, he basically tore up the old rule book, pulling the U.S. out of major international agreements like the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord. And he did fulfill a key promise by replacing NAFTA with the new USMCA.
But if you ask what his most lasting legacy is, it arguably comes down to just one number: 3. That's how many Supreme Court justices he appointed. By putting Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett on the court, Trump delivered on a huge promise to his conservative base and locked in a conservative majority on the nation's highest court for decades to come.
Now, when you have that much disruption, you are going to get some serious pushback. This period was just nonstop controversy, multiple investigations, and, in the end, 2 historic impeachments. For every action, there was a pretty big and pretty loud reaction.
Let's talk about the economy for a second, because the story here was, well, it was complicated. The country saw low unemployment, but the national deficit ballooned. Those 2017 tax cuts were a major reason why. The yearly deficit climbed from $666 billion when he took office to almost $1 trillion by 2019. And get this was all before the massive emergency spending for the COVID-19 pandemic.
Another thing that really defined his presidency was his relationship with facts. Fact-checkers at the Washington Post kept a running tally, and they documented this number: 30,573 false or misleading statements during his 4 years in office. The sheer volume was just unprecedented. Now, to his supporters, this was just him fighting back against a biased system. But to his critics, it felt like a dangerous erosion of shared reality.
The end of his first term, wow. It was one of the most chaotic periods in modern American history. After losing the 2020 election to Joe Biden, Trump launched an all-out campaign to overturn the results. This all came to a head on January 6, 2021, when a mob of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. Just 1 week later, the House impeached him for a historic second time, charging him with incitement of insurrection.
And that brings us to our final section, the comeback. We're going to look at the time after he left office, a time that was defined by legal battles and a political comeback that, once again, defied all conventional wisdom and rewrote the rules of American politics.
Yeah, leaving the White House did not exactly mean leaving the headlines. His post-presidency was just a storm of legal challenges from all sides. You had the FBI investigation into his handling of government documents. Then there were the investigations in New York over his business practices. You had the state prosecution down in Georgia for election interference. And of course, the federal prosecution related to January 6th.
But here is where the story takes another one of those completely unprecedented turns. Instead of being sidelined by all this, he used it as a political rallying cry. He launched another run for president, and in November 2024, he did something only one other president in history has ever done. He won a second, non-consecutive term, securing his return to the White House.
So why does all this matter? What's the bigger picture here? Well, his impact goes way beyond just his own career. He's created a whole political movement, which people call Trumpism. It's a style defined by its populist, anti-establishment message, its America First nationalism, and this very combative us versus them worldview. And it has totally transformed the Republican Party.
So from Queens to the White House and back again, Donald Trump's journey has been a story of constantly defying expectations. He is a figure who inspires incredible devotion and, at the same time, fierce opposition. As his story continues to unfold with a second term in office, the ultimate question really remains, how will history judge the full measure of his incredibly complex and disruptive life?